Okay, you guys are super welcome to today's class, and today we'll be doing something super interesting, right? Basically, this is like you taking your very first step into backend development with Python, right? And of course, in this channel we're doing all things Python, right? Helping you build AI solutions, right? And before you can build AI solutions, you need to know how to write the software and the rest, right? So, and that's the reason why we're looking into you building backend solution. And if you're doing backend solutions, right? You need to know how to write APIs, right? And API, it's practically a way how we communicate, how we communicate to our server, communicate to our database, and so on and so forth. So what we'll be doing in today's class is we having the ability to write our very first API, and trust me, we're going to make it simple. Then later, subsequently, would connect this to our database. So without too much talk, let's jump in. Okay, so this is a clean sheet which typically you'll be starting from, and if you look at the screen now, we just have VS Code running here. So what we would want to do now is so I would want us to create a virtual environment because that's where we'll be running our servers, right? So to do that, we'll just do let's do python dash m vem dot venv. Okay, so this is what we want to use, right? It doesn't really matter, you can use anything. Okay, and as it's creating a virtual environment, right? So if I should open this, you can see that some files has been created and more will be created here, right? So what I would want to do is for me to just come out here and create a file. So we're going to call it main.py. So this is where we'll be writing all our code, and believe me, we're just going to do a very simple CRUD operations, right? So that you can use this to understand these backend stuff, right? It's not difficult, it's super simple, right? Note that for this course we'll be using list a lot, and we'll be using dictionary, right? So these are the two major stuffs which we'll be using, and the reason for that is because typically our database would have would be stored as a list, right, with several stuff inside, and inside of those lists there will be dictionary, right? That is basically what we would be working with, right? So you just need to understand this. So just for recap, let's create a very simple list, right? From that list would build up. But before I go on, let's install the package which we'll be using. We'll be using very few of them, right? So the very first thing I would want to do is to move into this our virtual environment that we created, right? So to move into that, so I'll just do forward slash, right? You can see this virtual environment that we created. So I'll click that. Now if I should open this, right, we would see scripts, right? So that's where I want to go in now. Now that I'm inside the script, we want to activate it, right? So this is where I'm going to come now. So I'm just going to do activate, and we have this, then punch enter. So once I punch enter, you would notice this, right? So that indicates that now I'm inside the virtual environment, right? And this is where typically we'll be writing our codes and the rest, right? So let's get into it, right? So I'm going to close this, come back here, and let's start. So okay, like I said, the packages which would want to install is so we'll be using FastAPI, and we'll be using Uvicorn. So Uvicorn basically is just going to act as a server, right? Just like for Node we'll have Express server, right? So that's what this guy will be doing, but basically we'll be using Fast, right? Fast API to do this. So why the dependencies will be installing let's just do a recap for list and dictionary. So typically, let's say we have data, and our data is going to have series of dictionary inside, right? And I could just come in here and let me say ID to be 1, then let's say name, so name to be Peter, right? Then let me just duplicate this like 3 times. So if we come here, we have 2 and we have 3. So for name we could have James, and for year we could have Tunde, right? So basically this is a list, right? And inside this list we have dictionary. So few things I could do, I can iterate through so we can see this. So I just see that my pimp is sort of like outdated, so let me just okay, so let's upgrade it. So typically what we can do, we can use condition, and we would be using, so two important stuff we would use are basically would use condition, and we might use loop. And if we're using loop, we would want to use the for loop, right? It doesn't really matter what kind, right? But I feel using the for loop would make perfect sense, right? All right, so how do we basically do, say, let's say I want to see only this one, right? So okay, so let's say I want to see only this one, so I can do something like this. So let me say print, right? And I do data square bracket 0, right? So this is just going to give me the first items, right? That is cool. So it's going to give me the first item. The next thing I could do again is so I want to, okay, let's just check. So this is just going to give me this first item, so that's good. All right, so we have all our dependencies in store. So something I can quickly do so that we can experiment on this is, let me run our FastAPI. So I could just say from let's say FastAPI, let it import FastAPI. Okay, so now that we have that, so I could say my app will be equals to FastAPI, right? So since I now have this, I can start my server. So to begin it, I'm going to say Uvicorn, Uvicorn main app. So this, depending on what you define here, so this main is precisely this file, so main app. Then I want to call a reload, and let's give a port number of 3344, right? So if we run this it's going to spin our server up, right? And it will spin it at this port, right? So this is good. So what I can now do is I can run my server, so I could run it from here. At the moment we don't have anything, that's the reason why we can't see anything, but just to be sure that, so that you guys can see that something is happening, let's create a declarator, and I'm going to say use the get for our /, then create a function, and let me call it index. So yeah, I'm just going to say return message, and let that message be let's say first API. So save this now. Oops, got what I did there. All right, okay, so save this now. So once I save that and our server starts, so now you can see we're seeing something here, and if we should run this, we would see first API. So that gives us that indicator that our code is running. And something we can do, which I kind of like love FastAPI for, is this integration of Swagger UI, right? So we can get out of the box, get documentation of our servers, which is super good. And something we can do as well, of course, we'll be using Postman, right? So if I should come here and I do I say local host 23344, right? So we hit, oops, okay, so we hit that one. So we, oops, what's wrong? So we hit that and hit. All right, so we can see our first API, so that's good. Okay, so let's continue with these, then we'll come back with this. So now I did this print here, right? So if we should save, so let me just write something here so that we can see what's up here. So let's say let me just do view and we save this. So if we save that and it runs, we can see it here, so that's good. Let me just do print so that we can sort of like have breathing space here. So if we save that and it runs, we should so we'll see this here. So this is basically how would want to get the first element. And if I say I want to see the name for these, right, so I could come here and just do, let's say, name, and this is going to print out Peter. Exactly, so it's going to print out Peter. So that's one way we can use just do a little recap of how we can get an item from a list and how we can get a part from a list, right, or a key, a value from a list, right? So just put this at the back of your mind, right? So having done this, right, so let's get into it, right? So we'll be writing few lines of code, basically CRUD, right, which stands for create, right? So we'll be creating data, right? Read, we'll be reading data, and update, we'll be updating the data, and of course delete, right? So we'll be deleting data as well, right? So these are the CRUD operation, right, which we would jump into and look into. So let's start with the very first and the easiest, which is to read, right? So before I do that, let me just create sort of like data, right, which we'll be working with at the moment. So let me do this. So I would say ID. So ID, which is 1, then I can say let's say name, and name is going to be Peter, right? So let's just make this into 3, so 2 and 3. So here we would say James and Sunday, like we already have. All right, so the very first which we would want to work on is read, right? So let's do that for read. So I'm going to write the declarator again, which is app.get, and inside is our app.get. Well, now well, now I'm going to say, okay, we want to get everything inside. So I'm going to say /data, and inside here we'll do div, and we'll say get all data, right? So we'll come out and just do return data. That's how simple it is, right? So once we do this, we can be able to read our data. So if I come out here and I do /data, so let me maximize this a little. So and we hit on that, right, we're going to see our data. So that's good. You can see how quick, simple this whole thing is, right? I mean, that is how fast, like the name implies, right? So fast, right? So we're getting our data fast, right? So that's good. So what we've done with this, right, so we've created an endpoint that helps us to get all our data, right? The next endpoint which we're going to get now is perhaps we just want to get an item. So if you'd remember earlier on when I was doing that recap, I said, oh, how do we get one items, right? So let's come down here. So I'm going to say, okay, so let's say app.get, and we're going to say, let it be data and let's say an ID, right? So we can use the ID to fetch that data. So if I come down here, we'd say div, and let's say get single user, something like that, right? And this would need ID, and down here. So we know that like I explained earlier on, what we want to do is just to get one, right? Abi? Yeah. So we just want to get one item. So if you pass the ID, let it just give us that one item. So quickly, what we're going to do for this is I could do it severally, but let's try this one first. So let's use the for, right? Let's use the for loop, right? So what we want to do is to iterate through this. So if I say for user in data, right, so this is going to help me to do iterations, right? Now note, if I say print user, and I should save these, right? If I should run these, so let me come here and let's do something like /1. Look at this path here. So if I should run this, right? Right, so here is going to run through and give us everything, right? Which is like everything. Okay, but note that we don't want to see everything, we just want to see one. So that's where conditioning comes in, right? So what I can now do is remove this. So I could say if, right? So we'd use our if block to do that conditioning. So we'd say if user, and we want the ID, right? So this ID is strictly equals to ID, then let it return that user, right? So that's what we want. Now at the moment, if we should run this is going to crash at us, or it's not going to give us the exact value which we want. So for example, let's save here, and if I come here, so I put 1 and I run here, right? So you can see it's returning null, and the reason for that is because, all right, so the reason for that is basically because this ID, right? If I should sort of like, let's try that now. So let's do print ID. And another thing I would want to do is to say, okay, let's check the type of that ID, right? So let's save this now. All right, yeah, so save now. And we come back here, not here, so here. So we come back here. If I run this, let's see. So you can see that we got the ID. So this is the first print, right, which is 1. But the ID here is what? A string. But remember that this ID here is what? Number, right? So this is a number and this is a string. So it will always be returning false. And because of that, we'll be getting null. So we won't get the right value, right? So what we can do to fix that, right, is just to come here and say, okay, let there be a typecast here, right? So that it automatically, and this is off the hood, right? FastAPI is just going to convert the ID into an integer, and that's in a long way is going to help our code. So now let's save this now. So again, we're printing and we're checking, right? So if I should come back here and I run this, let's look at this. Now you can see we're getting results, but at the same time you can see that this is now an int, right? So that is super cool. So something I'm going to do, let me just do Control B to take that off and create more space here so that we can see this clearly. Okay, so if I come here and I do 2, we hit that, right? You can see we have James now. If I come here and I do 3, you can see would have Tunde, right? So everything is now fine. So this is how would get one, right? Get an individual. Yeah. Okay, so the next thing which is very important that we need to do is for us to sort of like create a user, right? So how do we create user? So let's come down. Very simple, very simple. So again, I'm going to create this declarator, so app.post, right? And for this we're doing let me just do a / data, right? And of course I could want to say create user, right? It doesn't really matter, right? So this is just my route, right? The next thing I'll now do is to create a function that will carry out that process. So I could say div create user, something like that, right? And this is going to take user, right? For the moment, I don't know what's the user, right? But it's going to create a user. Okay, so now that we have these, right? So the next thing I would want us to do is to play so that we can see what's happening under the hood. And that's what I really want you guys to know and understand, right? What's happening under the hood, so that you guys would understand every bit of what we're doing here. Okay, so the very first thing I would want to do is say, okay, let's print out this user, right? Let's print out this user. Now note that this user is going to take it must be a dictionary, right? So we want to take this dictionary, right, and add it up, right? So let me come here, or rather let me just take this off for now. We're going to do some work with this print, right? But let's just see first. Okay, I mean, what's stopping us, right? So let's print this user for now so that you guys can see what's happening. We've tied this user to be a dictionary, right? So we want to see the dictionary here. So if I should come here now, remove this, and I say create user, come here, make sure it is a post route, right? Make sure it's a post route. Then come to body, right? And make sure I'm on raw, and here make sure I'm on JSON, right? Note that this is the body. Now this is where we'll post our data or put our data, right? So if I come here, do this, so I could do ID, and let's say ID is 4. Then I could say name, and let the name be something like, let's say Shola, right? Now if I hit here, I want to see this value here, so I hit here now, and you can see that we're getting it here, so which is cool, right? That's cool, because now what we can now do is to take this value and add it into this data. So now let's do that. So I can come here, or rather let me just put it down here. So I can come down here and say, okay, let's say new, oh, there's no point doing that. So I could just say data, which is this data, right, dot append, right, dot append, and this append is going to take this user. And down here, so we could just come and return data. You can see how simple it is, right? So let's try this out so that you guys can see the changes that has happened here. So remember, we have Shola, and at the moment we have just 3 elements, right, or 3 dictionaries inside this list. So if I should come here now and hit, right, so now you can see we have now Shola added to our list, right? That's how simple it is, right? So we have Shola now added to our list. Now I just want, looking at these, right, it would be wise for our ID to be entering automatically, right? So that in a way, all we just need to do is just to add name, right? So name will just be what we'll be adding. For us to achieve that, it then means that we would want to preserve everything that is coming from here, so that we can name our dictionary ourselves, right? Or sorry, we can name the ID ourselves. So what I'm going to do for that is this. In fact, let's do it here. So let's say new data to be equals to, so I'm going to call this, then inside of here we'll say ID will be equals to length of data, right? So whatever the length of data is, that's what ID is going to be, right? Now if you look here, the length of this data is what? 3, right? That's what the length is. But remember that we want it to be an increment, so I could just say +1, right? So that's what the ID now is going to be, right? Okay, so now we can now say, okay, we want this, whatever is inside this user now, to be here. So I could just call this and do something like this, right? So what this means, it's me spreading all the items I have inside the list, or sorry, inside that dictionary, and call it here. So now it is this new data we would have inside here. So that's cool, right? So let's see if it works, right? Let's see if it works. So if I come here now, Shola, and I had this, and boom, we can see we have Shola now. If I say, okay, I want to add let's say Vicky, so we had this, and boom, you can see we now have Vicky, and you can see that our ID is entering automatically, right? So typically this is how you would want your backend code to be. Okay, that's for, okay, so that's for create, right? Now let's work for delete, right? So if I should do this, and we say app dot delete, so we could say data slash I could say remove user, and we need an ID, right? So I could just pass ID, right? So this is what we'll be using to identify the objects we want to remove. All right, so I could now do div, right, and say remove user, and remember we need an ID. All right. So this is going to be more or less like interesting as well, but before we move forward, it's important that we make sure that we do our conversion here, so making this ID an int, right? Okay, so what we are now going to do is, typically the method for removing an item is just for us to do dot remove, right? So and we can now pass a value here. So for example, let me just come here, pick this, right, and have it inside here, right? And if I come down here and just say, okay, return data, we save this, right? Okay, so let's run this code. So what I'm expected to see as our result is just this two, right? So if we come here, and let me just copy this, so we put this now, and it doesn't really matter the ID I'm passing, so whether it's 1 or 2, it doesn't really matter. It's the first one that would go off, right? So now if I should hit this now, method not allow, so let's see what's up. So data, oh sorry, so this should be delete, right? So we hit on that. All right, so you can see we're seeing these two, which is good, right? So that's our first step. So the next step we need to do is getting this, right? That's where the bulk of our code is going to be relying on. Okay, so now let's solve for that. So in order for us to get that, we need to iterate, right, to find an ID that would match with this, right? So what I can do for that is I would say for, let's say, user in data. Okay, now let me comment this. I hate seeing red lines. So now that we have these, right, so we can now do an if check, right? So we could say if user, the ID, right, is strictly equals to or matches with this ID, right? Obviously, let's do this. Let's say print that user. Okay, so let it print that user. Okay, so let's save this and let's see what we're getting. Of course, we'll get it right. So let me use 1, right? So if I should now hit here, and we look at our print, you can see that we can see Peter, right? Let me use 2. So let's use 2. If we hit on that, you can see we're seeing James, so that's good. So what we can now do, now that we're getting this, is for us to apply this code here, right? So we'll just come down here and we'll say data dot remove remove, right? And what are we removing? We're removing that user, right? And once we do that, it's important that we just return data, right? So let's save this. And now if we hit this, my friend, we're going to see 2 will be gone off. If I remove 1, we do that, right? We're going to see would only have these remain, and if I should remove 3, of course, our list would now be empty. Okay, so I think there's one code, yeah, I think update, right, which is going to be the last we're going to do. So just for you guys to understand these, right, so let me do this first. So if I say print, right, before we start, or rather let's just have the code inside there. So let's say app dot, we could use patch, we could use put. I prefer using patch, right? And we can say slash data slash update user. Then we need to know the ID we want, right? So come down here, then now div, let's say update user. Oops. So update user, and that needs an ID. All right, so now that we are here now, so what I was explaining earlier on is if I should sort of like, okay, so let's say data dot let's do 0 because we want to get that first, and I say name is equals to, and I change the name to be Peter Putin, right? So this has to be a string, right? Okay, so now we have this, and if I should now come here and say print data, right, you would observe that a change would have happened because I've mutated that dictionary. But then let's just see that, right? So let's come here and let me do this, just copy that, save here, and oops, so this should be patch and send it. Okay, so you can see what has happened here, right? So you can see that an update has happened to the name, right? So that's what we're now going to focus on now. Okay, so again, we need to iterate to get that ID. From there we'll now move on, but first thing we need to do is to convert here, right? So let me just remove what we have here. So we'd say for let's say user in data. Okay, so now say if if what user ID is strictly equals to ID, then what should happen? Would say user dot the name, right? Sorry, name should be equals to whatever the user would be typing, right? So we need to come here and pass in, collect the body, right? So let me call it name, right? And that name of course would be a string, right? And that would be name, right? Okay, so once we have this, what we can now do at the tail end, right? So let's say somewhere here, so I could say just return data. All right, so this is good. So that means that there's need for there to be a body, right? So let's come here and do Peter OC, right? So let's have that, right? Okay, think I would need to remove this. So oops, that means okay. So this can be a string, right? So this should be um, um, this should be a dictionary. So if it's a dictionary, then there's a problem here. So we could just do the name of that name, right? So whatever is coming from here, we'll just collect that name, right? So let's save that. And something I would want to do so that we won't miss it, right? So we could just print out that name. Okay, all right. So now we're using one and one patch. We have these, right? So if I should hit this, and if we come here, we can see this name is Peter Otzi. And now if we come here, we can see that change has happened. Just to be sure, this is James, right? So let's come here and do 2. And for James, let's say this is James, right? So we're changing it to James Otzi, and we hit on that and pull out. We see that is the update. And my friend, this is how we've been able to write our patch, update, delete, right? Create, read one user, and read all user. Very simple. In our subsequent video, we're going to see how we'll write this code in a modular way, because at the moment you can see that we just have everything chunked in here. Typically for scalability, this is not how you would write your code. That's one. And the second is we're using here as our database, which is not good, right? So we're storing our data here. So our subsequent video, we're going to see how we would take what we've written and have it in a structured database, right? So that our code can grow. We're going to make it modular, and yeah, that's it. So see you guys, and I hope by you watching this video you've understand fast, right? So fast is very simple, and see you guys in the next class. Yeah.